take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Welcome back to another episode on Take Flight Podcast. This week is with myself, Pabilo, who'll be doing a very short Take Flight takeaway with you. And if you've noticed, I haven't actually recorded for some time now. I think it's coming on to 2 months, but it's for a very, very special reason. And I think I mentioned that also in the last episode that we recorded. So since the last time I recorded a Take Flight takeaway, my life has changed in a most beautiful way again. Myself and my wife, we've been able to welcome our second boy into this world. So his name is Ahyan Aziz Timbo, and he was born on the 26th of July. So today's episode, is a personal one. I wanted sort of to share what it's been like for me as a father, us as a family, because so much changes with the second child. It's as magical of an experience as the first child, but there's so much that's different. And I thought the purpose of today's episode would be great, and hopefully be a reference or a point of guidance for anyone who's planning to have, children at some stage, especially planning to have more than one. So I'll first start with how I feel, how it feels, how I'm feeling, right? I think the first thing that sort of comes to mind, or I feel, is I just have children, right? I couldn't recommend having children more, right? It's God willing, if you're able to, 100% plan for them. I know my generation, we talk a lot about our career plan and building a career. But really, I think it's there's no other event in your life that I think will bring the best out of you the way children do. Right? I think if you want to feel true fulfillment, have children. If you want to feel what it's truly like to be in service to others, have children. If you want to feel what I think personally, what it feels like to achieve the highest form of living, have children. And so it just brings the absolute best out of you. And so that's kind of the first thing that I feel and sort of wanted to share and open up with. But I think what I'd say is ever since Ahyan was born, I've felt the deepest sense of gratitude, because firstly, you take a step back and you say, first of all, if you are healthy as an individual, that's something that you can't put a price on. But once you've been gifted with a healthy family, right? So it's 4 of us now. There's nothing. It's very difficult to find the words to describe how that feels. And I think for the listeners, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that for every day for about 9 months, something could go wrong with either the mum or the baby. So when you are progressing really well throughout the process of the pregnancy, your wife reaches full term, it's a huge blessing, and you're just super thankful and grateful. When you have a successful birth, that's another milestone where you're extremely thankful and grateful. And then the checks have been great along the way. And then when your baby's born and you go through the checks and everything turns out to be 100% healthy, it's the third and final ultimate blessing. So it's really, really, I've more than ever in my life before a real sense of gratitude and just being thankful for what I've been given. I will feel lucky because I get this once in a lifetime opportunity to raise babies into toddlers, and then into teenagers, and then into men, right? I remember when my wife, revealed to me that we were going to be having a boy, sat with me for a few days, and I think the one thing that hit me is I realized I've been given the opportunity to raise 2 men, and that's a lucky opportunity to sort of be in. So I feel extremely lucky. The other thing I feel is I feel like I have everything that I could have ever wanted. And everything that I receive now in life, whatever it may be, is just a bonus on top. Because I remember saying to my wife very, very clearly, I said, when God gives you as much as He has given us, all you can do at this point is just return it back to the world, right? And so you just need to give love back to other people. You need to help people in different ways, whatever it may be, sharing advice, sharing my experience here, because you're in a position where, especially with the second child, more so than I felt with Karen, I have everything that I've ever wanted. I've been given everything, and I feel this real sense of duty that I have to give back in more ways than one. So that those are sort of, if some of the strong feelings that I felt over the last 2 months, and I'm also still feeling as well. At the same time, I've also felt an enormous amount of responsibility, like positive pressure, to ensure that I and my wife create a really successful and prosperous environment for the kids to thrive in, right? I remember vividly, and I'll share this personally, the day Lauren and Ayan came home. I remember sitting on the sofa and I was, relearning what it was like to hold a newborn again, holding a yarn. Karen was now, playing in front of me. And at one point, I remember was looking out in the window. The weather was great, and it hit me, and I said to myself, "What my wife and I do, what we say, how we feel, shapes the way that these kids grow up. It shapes their environment, um, and everything that they experience moving forward is based on our vision, what plan we put together, our work ethic." So I really felt this sort of, it was pressure, but I think in a more positive way. There's no margin for error. You really have to get whatever you're doing right, because these kids are ultimately, there's no other place they're going to look for guidance. You are the parents, and it's on you guys. So and that's something that I naturally feel even today, but very much so within the first couple of days of also everyone being home. um, and I think with the first child, maybe just to do a quick comparison, it was very much, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm a dad. Everyone look at my baby. There's tons of pictures. You're posting, you can't wait to tell everyone. And with the second one, you still have those same elements and feelings. But I think me, at least as the father, as the man, I went into this deeper sense of, okay, what's the plan? How do we ensure that we curate a perfect or close to perfect environment for the kids? What's next? What are the real building blocks? More so than I did with the first one, right? And what do we do to ensure that they can really thrive? So yeah, so those are the feelings. Those are sort of the strong feelings that I felt. And what I also wanted to do is very openly and honestly share with you, I think, what makes having a second child challenging. And I remember my mother and seniors and mentors of mine said to me, even before I had my first child, the second child is a real game changer. And they say, because at that point no one's hands are free. But you never really know until you actually have your second child. You think, oh yeah, okay, well, there's people always say things are hard, but I can triumph, and I can, um but there's a lot of adjusting that is required. And I'll share with you a little bit as to what makes it, I think, challenging, at least from my own personal experience. um just a bit of context. So Karim is homeschooled, so he's with us 24/7. So from the moment I wake up to the moment I sleep, he's with us. And that's sort of his development program as we speak. So there are great benefits to that, but also there are drawbacks at that time. So that just gives you a perspective in terms of just how full on it is for us as parents. But I think one of the obvious challenges that starts to become apparent is, as you're leading up to having your second child, what you don't appreciate until everything changes, is that you actually have the perfect rhythm with the first child. When he sleeps, when you have time for yourself, when you have time sort of with your wife, someone's hands are always free. Um, and you've kind of figured that out. And then when the second child arrives, all of that work that you've worked on, however many years that the first child is, goes out the window. You've got to literally start from scratch, and you've got to literally start all over again in terms of what's the best rhythm for us as a family, because it's a change not only for you as a father, also the wife, and also your first child, which I'll talk a little bit about. So that's the thing that you with all this experience of having your first child, you've got to start from scratch, blank piece of paper, and you kind of have to just sort of, in the beginning, go with the flow. um and that takes some doing, right? I think, and the reason why that's tough is for someone like myself who wears multiple hats. You're constantly thinking about how do you best divide your time between your career that's going on. You've got your business, also your wife, your first child, your baby. And so I live and die by my routine, right? And it's what allows me to be successful. So to be in a position where there is no routine, which you knew going into it, but you actually can't use the routine that you had with the first child at all, that becomes something that you're constantly wrestling with your mind mentally. And I'll come on to a little bit in terms of some suggestions and tips as to sort of how to sort of get around that. But yeah, you sleep in pockets for the first few weeks. Everyone knows I like to be up between 4 and 4:30. That's out the window. You wake up, when the baby cries, your wife is up, you think you're the first one up, and you realize your wife's been up longer than you. You're not check, you should not, definitely don't check the time or the clock when you wake up, because otherwise you go crazy. Whenever you can, you try and find 10 and 15 minutes nap as a power nap. So there's absolutely no routine. And that's very difficult to swallow and accept. The other thing that is quite interesting is quite interesting. It's a bit of a challenge, is because I actually spent more time with my first child, Karen, than Ahyan, because it was very important in terms of how he is. It was very important to understand how he feels in this process. And I give my wife a lot of credit for that, because she did brief me weeks before Ahyan. She said to me, "We really have to pay attention to how Karen feels, how he's behaving." And why that's challenging is because, as you can imagine, you're thinking, as you have a second child coming into this world, you're going to be spending a lot of time with that second child. And honestly, there were days where I may have actually held Ahyan once for a few minutes, and the rest of the day I have to spend it with Karen, because his behavior is obviously very, very important to us as a family. How he feels, knowing that he's loved even more, than before. He's part of this family, and I've been, Karen, when you're old enough and you can understand and you listen to this episode, I have to thank you a lot for just your how you've been, right? You've been just an incredible role model and big brother already at the age of 2 and 3. So it was very, very important to spend time with the first child, and that's something that you don't necessarily think about, or I thought about, or would be the case actually when coming into it. What I think, what else makes it challenging, or you have to kind of get to grips with, is, I think, at least for me, is from the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep, you're in constant service to your family, right? So you're making sure everybody has what they need when they need it. And that's where I think the real work comes into play. You don't really get a moment's rest. It's very, very meaningful work, but it's understanding quickly, and I kind of wish I knew this before, but that's just how life works, is that those breaks that you're looking for don't come, right? You just have to keep going. You have to keep servicing your family, and in the end, it's what creates the success when you look back. But that's, I think, what adds to sort of a challenge. And also, if you combine the fact that, at least for me, I always wanted to make sure that my wife is not doing anything she doesn't need to be doing, right? So while she's recovering and she's spending time with Ahyan, I'm then, the one that's actually managing and keeping everything around the house as it needs to be, making sure that the apartment is clean, making sure the foods are ready, lunch, dinner, breakfast on time, things of that nature. So that just gives you some sense as to sort of the adjustment. I'm only 2 months in. There are going to be a lot more challenges and opportunities that are going to be coming on the horizon. But this just gives you a sense as to what's the adjustment, where the adjustment is, why it's sort of real hard work than ever before. It's nothing like the first child. I think, looking back now, the first child feels like a honeymoon. The second child is the second child, because it's the second child and it's 4 of you, right? So it's this real sort of sense of work that you have to put forth to make sure that you just continue to have a great experience as a family. And yeah, I think that's the honest perspective on it. You'll be tested, but having said all of that, having said, having spoken about those challenges, having spoken about what makes it difficult, I've always said to my wife, I would rather two children crying at the middle of the night at 2, 3, 4 a.m. than no children crying at all. I would rather us figuring out why Ahyan is still crying, we've given him everything, than no second child at all. I'd rather carry him struggling to adapt to what's going on than no first child at all, right? So you get, in the end, it's just, it's work. You'll be tested mentally, but it's in the end, it's the most fulfilling and rewarding and meaningful work I think there is out there. So just a couple tips, just to end with a couple tips to sort of consider that I've learned through going through this process, and I'm still going through, and I just wanted to openly share this. I think the very first thing that this is also to myself and also to others listening, is to be patient at the fact that your life is changing in a massive way, right? I said to myself at one point, did you really think that you was going to continue with a perfect routine as you have done so far? No, right? Even if you're a high performer, you're an ambitious person, you have to be patient at the fact that your life is changing. The second thing is, and this is something which, looking back now, is everything. I wish, and this is why I think this is what really created the real work, or the sense that there was so much to do from the moment I woke up to the moment I slept. I said to my wife, before we have a third, fourth, and fifth child, sixth child, however many children we want to have next, we will have a cleaner, a cook, and a driver in place to make sure that my time is freed up as a man, so I can actually then focus on my children, my wife, because I think the work, what takes on the extra work, and what is really, really taxing on the mind and body, is ensuring that you have to have the apartment that needs to be straight, the food needs to be the food needs to be ready, and if you're driving around to collect things, that's a lot of energy, and it takes its toll on you. So having the right staff members in place, whether it's friends, family, whether you pay for it, I think is very important, and I think it's also about planning for this type of support. The third thing I'll say is, at some point in time, after maybe a month or two, start thinking about how you can set yourself up for success with your family. So we've only now started to put together a routine, an agenda, where I have my set of blocks, so does my wife, so does Karen, and we can see across the time what we're doing together. So for example, I just give you a quick example. I wake up super early. I'm in the gym from 7 till 9. I come back home, I tag team with my wife. She then goes from the gym till 9 to 11. I take the kids in that time. So this is something which starts to create success when you start to have this in place. The fourth thing I'll say is, you'll find that you have to focus more on your first child than the newborn baby. I know that sounds hard and tough. You then have to focus more on your wife more than the newborn baby, in terms of how she's feeling mentally and also physically. So in terms of its order, it's first child, wife, baby, then yourself, because the baby doesn't know what's going on, right? You come last as a man, and that's how it is. And maybe there are some days where there is actually no time for you at all, and that's just how it is. The final thing I'll say is just sort of a tip, as a recommendation, is to, as best as possible, shut everything off. Focus on your family, prioritize your family for the first couple months. Your business, your career opportunities, your wealth opportunities, those phone calls, whatever it may be, can wait, because you don't want to be looking back 5-10 years from now saying, I wish I'd spent more time with my family in those early years, because your wife needs it, your first child needs it, especially when you have your second child. So those are some tips I wanted to share. So I hope that was sort of helpful for anyone that's listening. How I feel, how it feels, why it's a challenge, where you sort of get a sense that it's a challenge, some tips to consider. And as I close, there's only one way for me to close, which is, one, to thank, first of all, my parents, especially my mum, just for that sort of, those gold pieces of gems and insights that they give you over the years. It plays a role. My in-laws also, but I can't thank my wife enough for just, she creates the most beautiful experience. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without her. Sometimes I think to myself, she's not actually human. I think she's something else, because I just don't know how she's able to just sort of thrive, when it takes its toll mentally and also physically, and having a child is it's just an incredible experience. And so, all I do is just the hard labor work, but they have to do the things that is actually special. So Lauren, when you listen to this, I love you, and I really, really thank you for all your work. It's just incredible, so thank you. And yeah, to everyone listening, I hope you've taken something from this, and I'll catch up with you on the next episode.
Take off, take flight with you.